Dear Chosen One, they had no idea what they were doing when they came for you. They didn't realize they weren't just poking at a person, they were provoking the current of the universe itself. Now, that current is crashing through everything they built, and there's no off switch. They should have backed off the moment the air shifted, when the silence grew heavy, but they kept poking, pushing, trying to drag your spirit into their chaos. Now, everything they set in motion is circling back like a boomerang they never thought they'd have to catch. The mouths that laughed at your silence are now mute. The people who mocked your peace are begging for it. What they thought was a game against you was them pulling the tail of something ancient, holy, and untouchable. Now, they're facing consequences, not from you, but from a divine system that never forgets who it protects. Before we dive deeper, I want to say thank you, truly, for all of you supporting this channel through Super Thanks. I see you, and I'm deeply grateful. Your love keeps this message moving. Even if you've never given a cent, just being here, listening, sharing, and growing means more than you know. You're part of something shaking the ground beneath the illusion. Thank you. Now, listen closely. Chosen One, this was never just about you. This was about them pulling against universal law without realizing it. You weren't reacting. You were resonating. You weren't breaking. You were recalibrating. While they thought they were isolating you, they were setting themselves up for a fall they didn't see coming. Have you ever questioned yourself after being pushed out? Wondered if you were too sensitive, too intense, too intuitive? That wasn't delusion, that was divine insight. You were reading what they were too afraid to admit. You weren't crazy, you were clear. Clarity can feel like a curse when you're surrounded by people who thrive in confusion. Stop doubting your power just because they couldn't handle its weight. Your isolation wasn't exile, it was insulation. While they played checkers with egos, gossip, and manipulation, the universe was moving in silence, setting the chessboard. Now, the pieces are falling exactly where your spirit always felt they would. Everyone involved is feeling it now, the liars, the enablers, those who watched you suffer and clapped in secret. They didn't just cross you, they came against a force they didn't understand. Now, they're facing that force in ways they can't pray away, lie away, or talk their way out of. And you're still standing, not bitter, not broken, but aligned. That's what's haunting them. Not your anger, not your revenge, but your elevation. The fact that you're still here while their masks melt, their relationships crumble, and the system they use to cover their chaos collapses under its own weight. So stand in that, not with pride, but with peace. Not with arrogance, but with awareness. They thought they could destroy you, but you were never the weak link, you were the signal. If this message is hitting your spirit, do one thing like subscribe and drop $9.99 in the comments. That number is more than digits. It's divine confirmation. It signals to this platform and the universe that you feel the shift, that you know who this message is for. If you've ever been the target of manipulation, silence, or betrayal, and now you're watching the system that came against you crumble, this is your confirmation. This isn't random. This is divine alignment. Let's go deeper, because the more we break this down, the louder the truth gets. Stay locked in, chosen one. Everyone involved is getting karma, wishing they had just left you alone. No. They poked the quiet one and triggered the whole system. Chosen one. They underestimated you. They mistook your silence for surrender, your stillness for submission. But in doing so, they awakened something they never should have touched. You weren't just another person walking quietly through chaos. You were the tripwire God placed in plain sight, ready to activate when injustice reached its boiling point. When they stepped on it, they didn't just offend you, they disrupted a divine balance. Have you ever wondered why your presence alone shakes rooms? Why, even when you speak softly, the atmosphere changes? That's because you weren't placed here to survive. You were planted to signal a shift. What they did wasn't personal. It was spiritual interference. Now, the universe, heaven itself, is correcting every vibration they distorted, not with rage, but with precision. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. Psalm 9:9. They didn't realize you were stamped by God, marked before birth. They targeted you, thinking they'd win some shallow ego war by isolating, mocking, or spreading lies. But they weren't just messing with your emotions, they were tampering with sacred alignment. Now, the cord they snapped is recoiling with force, wrapping around them. Take Chadwick Boseman quiet, deeply spiritual, moving in silence while the world underestimated the weight he carried. People mocked his weight loss, not knowing his silence was strength. His legacy outlived their laughter. Just like you. Chosen one, you're the still force carrying divine assignment. Once the curtain lifted, it was too late for apologies. Karma isn't petty, it's mathematical. When someone targets a chosen one, the universe doesn't panic, it recalibrates. It collects every lie, betrayal, and smug grin like receipts, then pays them back with interest. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Galatians 6:7. They thought they won because you didn't fight back, because you stayed quiet, because you walked away. But the silence wasn't surrender, it was setup. The stillness before the flood. The system you're connected to doesn't roar, it whispers, then moves mountains. Now, every scheme they built is crumbling under its own falsehood. Look at Colin Kaepernick, labeled rejected, ridiculed for taking a silent knee. But his silence triggered a movement, forced conversations, exposed systems. They thought they were silencing him, but they amplified a signal. Sound familiar? Chosen one. There was a moment you doubted, looked in the mirror, and asked, did I imagine this? Was I too sensitive? That confusion wasn't weakness. It was the weight of being a vessel, one that held what others couldn't handle. You weren't wrong, you were righteous. Heaven knew what it was doing when it let you sit in that stillness. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11. Now, the tables have turned. Those who laughed at your downfall watch their foundations crack. The ones who whispered lies hear truth shouting over them. The silence they mistook for defeat echoes in courtrooms. Friendships, mental breakdowns, and collapsing reputations. The storm is here, and they've got front row seats, like Britney Spears, painted as unstable while the world mocked. Her endured silence became a roar that led to the global Free Britney movement. What looked like defeat was divine setup. You were the mirror they feared, not because you exposed them, but because your presence reflected what they couldn't fake. They tried to project their brokenness onto you, but all they did was peel the veil off their own delusion. Now, the hands that threw stones scramble to catch falling bricks from the collapse they created. Vengeance is mine, and recompense, for the time when their foot shall slip, for the day of their calamity is at hand. Deuteronomy 32:35. If you're still asking, why me? Here's the divine truth: you were strong enough to carry what they could never endure. You didn't wear power like a performance, you wore it like a mantle. The universe honors that integrity. You weren't chosen to be liked. You were chosen to be effective. Think of Princess Diana, hunted by the press, misunderstood by royalty, yet loved globally. They tried to silence her through shame, but her truth, compassion, and legacy grew louder. That's the anointing on your life. Chosen one, the kind that outlasts betrayal. So don't shrink back. Don't apologize for the protection on your life. You didn't lose friends. You lost liabilities. You didn't suffer in vain. You became a channel for justice. You weren't delayed. You were divinely positioned. Now, as the system rebalances, let every echo of their deception collapse under truth. Let every ounce of peace stolen from you be repaid tenfold. You don't need to announce your comeback, it's already in motion. They didn't just poke the quiet one, they activated divine judgment. Now, the system is answering loudly, righteously, and completely no to. They laughed at the warning. Now, they're crying through the wreckage. Chosen one. Do you remember when they laughed? When your truth became their entertainment, your insight sharp, divinely tuned, filled with precision, was twisted into a joke. They didn't just mock your words, they mocked your discernment, turning your spiritual clarity into a punchline to protect their comfort. But comfort doesn't last when built on denial. Now, the joke has collapsed, and the punchline is dragging everything they built down with it. Have you noticed how loud people get when they're trying to drown out the truth? They laughed, not because you were wrong, but because your awareness scared them. When someone walks into a room carrying energy that sees through things, it unsettles those who depend on illusion. So they dismissed you, rolled their eyes, whispered in circles, made you the topic of their group chats. But now, the things they dismissed are setting fire to their reality. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Luke 8:17. Look at Edward Snowden. They mocked his warnings, called him paranoid, dramatic, unpatriotic. But over time, every piece of his insight became undeniable truth. The ones who laughed helped build the structure now turning against them, like you. He wasn't trying to destroy, he was trying to reveal. But revelation comes with consequences, because warnings aren't always welcomed. especially when they cut too deep. Chosen one. Let's not rewrite history. They didn't just ignore you, they ridiculed you, labeled you too intense, too serious, always seeing too much. They called it overthinking, fear-mongering, drama. But now, those same people are wide awake in the chaos you described, unable to sleep, spiraling in confusion, unsure how to move forward. Why? Because every word you spoke is unfolding like a prophecy they laughed at too soon. When pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. Proverbs 11:2. Think of Greta Thunberg. World leaders and media scoffed at her urgency, mocked her age, emotions, and passion. But now, the floods are here, the fires are real, and the silence from those critics is louder than ever. She wasn't dramatic, she was clear, just like you. Her warning wasn't about control, it was about care, but arrogance couldn't hear it. How many times did you hold your tongue, trying not to overreact? How often did you swallow your intuition to keep the peace? You felt the tension in your spirit, but everyone smiled and said, "Relax, now." That fake peace is breaking, and they're standing in the rubble of their own dismissal. Meanwhile, you're grounded, focused, unbothered. You weren't crazy, you were correct. They didn't just ignore a person, they ignored a signal. Chosen ones aren't just people with opinions, they're vessels with purpose. When a chosen one gives a warning, it's not ego, it's spiritual alignment. You weren't trying to control the outcome, you were preparing people for the truth they pretended not to see. But instead of listening, they laughed. Now, the laughter has turned to silence. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Proverbs 27:12. Take Anthony Bourdain. He spoke of the emotional toll fame, travel, and cultural awareness placed on his soul. Many shrugged it off as artistic temperament, but behind his wit and brilliance was a man bearing invisible weight. When the world lost him, they revisited his words. Warnings often sound like noise to those who don't want to hear. Now, those who mocked you are haunted not by you, but by how right you were. They remember every pause in your voice, every time you offered insight with love, every time your energy shifted when you sensed something brewing. They dismissed it all, but the universe never wastes truth. It stores it until it's time to unfold. That time is now. He who has ears, let him hear. Matthew 11:15. Look at Jeanine Cummins, author of American Dirt. Early praise ignored warnings about inauthentic representation. Those warnings were dismissed until public backlash shattered the book's reputation. Truth doesn't die, it waits. Chosen one. Stop apologizing for being right. Stop editing your voice because it disrupts illusions. They didn't mock you for lacking clarity. They mocked you because your clarity made them confront what they weren't ready to see. Confrontation is part of awakening, and they're in it now, whether they admit it or not. This isn't punishment, it's alignment. This is what happens when ego outweighs humility, when laughter drowns discernment, when people silence warnings that expose too much. You don't need to say, "I told you so." Your silence is doing that work. Your stillness is louder than ever. What's next for you? You rise, you build, you keep moving in clarity, not as a reaction to their failure, but as a reflection of your purpose. Let them stumble through their chaos. You did what you were called to do. You spoke. You warned. You stayed aligned. Now, your voice, the one they mocked, is the echo following them everywhere they go. Let them cry through the wreckage. Let them sit with the cost of their arrogance. This isn't revenge, it's rhythm. This isn't pettiness, it's prophecy. You were never the unstable one. You were the accurate one. Early, clear, and called. No. 3. Karma wasn't late. It was dressing for the funeral. Chosen one. There's something sacred about your silence. It wasn't retreat, it was reset. While they danced on your absence like it was a victory parade, karma was backstage, not rushing, not reacting, but preparing. Karma doesn't show up when you want it to. It arrives when they've convinced themselves they've gotten away with everything. That's when the universe decides it's time. Not out of revenge, but divine justice. Have you seen someone smile too wide, too early, as if the story's ended? That's what they did. Celebrated in the first act, not knowing the climax was coming. They mistook your exit for defeat, your silence for surrender, your peace for permission. But chosen one, don't stay silent because they're scared they trust a higher court. One that doesn't operate on gossip or group chats. One that writes final chapters with clarity. The Lord works righteousness and justice for all who are oppressed. Psalm 103:6. Think of Brittany Griner, detained overseas, ridiculed, underestimated, left in uncertainty. In the silence of those days, pressure built in time. Justice moved not loudly, but forcefully. Her release wasn't from noise. It was unseen power moving behind closed doors. So it is with you. Chosen one, you didn't shout, you stepped back, and heaven stepped in. While they rewrote the narrative, karma gathered every receipt. While they painted you as unstable, karma stitched a pattern so undeniable their excuses unravel. They thought karma missed them, but it was choosing its wardrobe robes of truth, gloves of exposure, shoes laced with precision. Now, it's walking into their lives like an uninvited guest to a party they threw on the grave of your dignity. They had time, space, moments to make it right, to clean up what they smeared, to apologize before it escalated. But they didn't. They doubled down, mocked more, lied better, smiled wider. Now, the explosion they thought would never come is shaking the ground they stood on so proudly. They dig a deep pit to trap others, then fall into it themselves. Psalm 7:15. Look at Megan Fox, misunderstood for years, called crazy for speaking on spiritual truths. She was mocked by media and those around her who couldn't comprehend her frequency. But time showed her beliefs were accurate. She didn't fight back with fire. She watched the world come back to her truth. That's you. Chosen one, you've been watching, waiting, letting truth do the talking. Karma isn't emotional, it's mathematical. Not interested in pity or PR. It deals in balance. When someone attacks a soul protected by divine alignment, the universe doesn't scream. It recalibrates quietly, precisely. When the equation completes, the solution is always consequence. Have you felt a moment when your spirit said, "It's not over"? That's not paranoia, that's divine intelligence. While they threw dirt on your name, heaven was planting you deeper. While they laughed, angels were recording. While they pretended the fire wasn't real, they danced on a gas leak. Now, they're choking in the smoke. God is just. He will pay back trouble to those who trouble you. In Thessalonians 1:6. Think of Tiger Woods, once praised, then humiliated. His silence was taken as defeat, but he rebuilt quietly, powerfully, when he returned. It wasn't for applause. It was proof that karma isn't final. It's refining. He didn't beg for image repair. He became the repair, like you. You didn't need to defend yourself. You became the evidence, chosen one. Don't mistake your elevation for isolation. You weren't cast out, you were carved out, removed, not because you were weak, but because the blast radius was too low for someone carrying a purpose this high. You thought you were forgotten, but heaven was making space. What they built was too shallow to bury you, too fragile to handle your truth. Now, they're unraveling, and the most haunting part for them isn't what's happening, it's remembering your voice. The tone you used, the calmness that held too much clarity, the silence that followed their betrayal. That silence wasn't void, it was charged. The air pulling back before the thunder hits. Whoever sows injustice will reap calamity, and the rod of his fury will fail. Proverbs 22:8. Look at Johnny Depp, painted as the villain without trial, silenced, mocked, abandoned, but the silence turned into evidence, and the evidence into restoration. Those who laughed first ate their words last. Truth has a rhythm, and rhythm always catches up. Chosen one, hear this clearly. You don't need to clear your name. Your alignment is doing it. You don't need to show receipts. The system kept the records. You don't need to rehearse the pain. It's being rewritten into power. Stay focused. Stay clean. Stay elevated. They thought karma was absent, but it was dressing for a funeral, not yours. But for the death of every illusion they tried to keep alive. Suited in silence. Polished with truth. Arriving late, but always on time. The most terrifying part for them, it's just getting started. No. Heretofore, they wanted you to break. Now they're the ones cracking. Chosen one, let's not sugarcoat it. They didn't stumble into your pain. This was targeted, calculated, intentionally cruel. They saw your light and decided to snuff it out rather than let it shine. When they couldn't break you with kindness, they switched to strategy. They made your pain a storyline, your struggles a spectacle, your name a punchline. But now, the spectacle is turning inward. The light they tried to dim is exposing every crack in their foundation. While you stand strong, maybe even glowing, they're trembling under the weight of the mask they built to mock you. Why were they so committed to seeing you fall? Why did they need you to fail? Because your existence challenged their illusion. Your grace threatened their control. Your endurance made their insecurity tremble. So they projected, smeared, made your resilience look like arrogance, your discernment like delusion. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done. The saving of many lives. Genesis 50:20. Think of Serena Williams, dominant, composed, fiercely focused. Yet she's faced more attacks than most athletes. Called emotional for showing passion, penalized unfairly, caricatured in media. They wanted to rattle her into silence, to make her second-guess her fire. But she didn't bend or break. Now, she stands as a legend. The storm they tried to outlast. That's you, chosen one. They threw storms at you, expecting you to drown. Instead, you learned to breathe underwater. They wanted you to unravel publicly so they could say, "See, we were right." But you didn't give them that satisfaction. You didn't react, you refined. You didn't collapse, you clarified. Do you remember how they watched you like entertainment? The subtle digs, fake concern, group chats built around your downfall. They didn't just want to hurt your feelings, they wanted to destroy your credibility. One whispered rumor at a time. They wanted you labeled dramatic, unstable, a problem. If they could distort how others saw you, they wouldn't have to face how your truth exposed their lies. But they never expected silence could be this loud. Your refusal to join their chaos became the one thing they couldn't spin. Now, they're unraveling under the spotlight they built for you. So do not fear them, for nothing is concealed that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be made known. Matthew chapter 10:26. Look at Janet Mock, the trailblazing author and director, scrutinized, criticized, whispered about. People called her too bold, too political, too much, but her truth stood taller than their fear. She built a legacy while they drowned in their projections, like you. She didn't scream her worth, she became it. Chosen one. Let's not pretend it didn't hurt. There were nights you sat in silence, wondering, am I the problem? You carried doubt, not because you lacked truth, but because the world tried to convince you your sensitivity was weakness. Now, you see that sensitivity was your superpower. You weren't fragile, you were finely tuned. The energy you held in grace is echoing back in justice. They're not confused by the consequences, they're haunted by them. Every lie they told walks into the room before they do. Every half-truth loops in their mind like a broken chorus. The silence they used as cover is now unbearable. Because silence speaks loudest when it's no longer on your side. The wicked flee, though no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. Proverbs 28:1. Consider Brendan Fraser, blacklisted for speaking out about abuse. The industry cast him out, mocked him, tried to erase his story. But divine timing doesn't rush. When it returned, it brought restoration, not just for him, but for everyone disbelieved. He didn't retaliate, he waited. Now, he stands on ground that almost broke him, redeemed, not ruined. They wanted you humiliated, but you were purified. They wanted you isolated, but you were insulated by divine grace. The platform they tried to bury you under is now the foundation you stand on. You're no longer in the room they tried to discredit you in. You're building somewhere higher, out of reach, unavailable. Now, they're cracking slowly, publicly, tragically. The ones who laughed at your stillness fumble for peace they can't find. It was never you who was unstable, it was them. Performing certainty while carrying chaos. The masks are slipping, and they have no backup plan. You don't need to clap back your composure as the collapse. You don't need to explain your alignment is the answer. You don't need to break your silence to prove anything. Your peace is doing the talking. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Psalm 46:1. Think of Gabrielle Union, who faced rejection, dismissal, and sabotage. She stayed grounded, open, and her story flipped not because she fought harder, but because truth works over time when left undisturbed. She was pushed out of rooms that couldn't handle her strength, and in doing so, was ushered into rooms they couldn't enter, chosen one. You didn't fail when you walked away, you were rescued. The destruction they tried to hand you was redirected. Now, circling their lives like a storm they called on themselves. The pressure they designed for you is crushing them. The most poetic part, you're not looking back. You're free. If any part of you wonders why it had to go this way, understand what was meant to break you was allowed to touch you, only to reveal what was unbreakable within you. They built a false narrative around your pain, thinking it would ruin you. Instead, it revealed them. Walk tall without apology, without bitterness, without guilt. You didn't get lucky you got delivered. What's unraveling now isn't your story, it's theirs. Let them hold the pieces. Let them try to tape together the image they destroyed with their own hands. You don't owe them clarity or closure. You owe yourself continuation. You didn't break, you became the evidence. No. 5. The thought of you being chosen haunts them at night. Chosen one. They'll never admit it, but you haunt them not because you sought revenge, not because you exposed their lies, but because you survived. You outlasted situations designed to crush you. The thought that you were chosen this whole time is the nightmare they can't escape. They didn't think you'd make it through. They expected your silence to be permanent, your absence to mean defeat, your isolation to erase you. But instead of folding, you stood firm. You endured without applause, moved forward without explaining, healed without broadcasting your scars. That strength echoes in their minds long after the performance is over. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. Isaiah 54:17. Let's talk about Demi Lovato. The media defined her by struggles, mocked, doubted, dismissed at her lowest. But she rose raw, vocal, powerful, not for validation, but with undeniable evolution. Her recovery haunted her critics, not because it was loud, but because it was real. That's what you did, chosen one. You didn't retaliate, you resurrected. You didn't fight to be seen, you walked away. Letting alignment make the noise. Now, Those who bet on your downfall choke on the silence you left behind. Chosen one, don't clap back, they become the consequence. Did you think your endurance went unnoticed? Did you believe that because they didn't say your name, they didn't feel your presence? You're wrong. You stopped showing up physically, but your energy never left the room. You didn't need titles, platforms, or status. You had conviction. Conviction doesn't need credentials. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Psalm 23:4. Think of Malala Yousafzai, whose voice threatened a regime. They tried to silence her permanently, but even after a bullet, she returned stronger, not in bitterness, but in purpose. Her survival was the message. The same is true for you. They don't talk about you because they forgot you. They stay silent because they remember and can't face it. Your existence is their unfinished sentence. Your presence the mirror they can't look into. They thought your fall would prove their point, that your silence would validate their lies, but you've become the reflection they can't avoid. Every time your name rises, it presses a bruise they hoped would heal without accountability. Have you noticed their tone shift when your truth is brought up? How their laughter fades, their faces stiffen. That's not coincidence, that's memory. Their conviction, not yours. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Matthew 5:14. Consider Robert Downey Jr., once mocked, labeled, thrown out of the industry. He was the cautionary tale until he became the comeback no one saw coming. The industry that turned its back opened its arms, not because he begged, but because he transformed. Transformation. Chosen one is what makes your presence so threatening. They saw you at your lowest, never imagining who you'd become at your highest. Are you still wondering why they didn't clap for you? Why your warning fell on deaf ears? Why your energy was too much? You weren't made to entertain them. You were sent to expose imbalance. People don't fear correction. They fear being seen. You saw past their filtered kindness, forced smiles, curated performances. You didn't need to call them out. Your clarity was loud enough. You exposed what they worked to hide. When light walks into a room of shadows, the shadows panic. Not because the light speaks, but because it reveals everything. Now, those who called you too much, too intense, too emotional, deal with the fallout of what they tried to bury. Their rehearsed empathy, fake peace, borrowed personalities can't stand up to the reality you carry. You didn't say much, but you saw too much. That's what they fear most. For God gave us a spirit, not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. 2 Timothy 1:7. Take Keanu Reeves. Enigmatic, not chasing attention, moving with calm authenticity, despite grief, betrayal, and loss. His presence commands respect. Why? He carries energy that can't be manufactured. That's your spirit. You weren't meant to compete, but to confirm, chosen one. You were chosen, not selected for show, but separated for purpose. You weren't sent to make people comfortable. You were sent to disrupt what could no longer stay hidden. That's why your truth haunts them, why your presence lingers, why your silence feels like a sermon. You don't need to remind them of what they did life's doing that work. You don't need closure. The consequences are knocking. No matter how far they run, they'll always be reminded of one thing: they can't delete your alignment. You didn't haunt them with vengeance, you haunted them with existence. So why are you shrinking? Why wonder if you're too much? Why water yourself down for people who couldn't carry your truth? You don't need to be palatable. You need to be present. Your presence doesn't need explanation. It needs to be owned. You are the echo, the consequence, the alignment that outlived every lie. They won't tell the truth, not publicly, maybe not to themselves, but every time they hear your name, every mention of your evolution, every time your silence walks into the room before you do, they'll remember, not because you demanded it, but because your existence does. You were chosen, not a title to wear, but a frequency to carry. You don't carry revenge, you carry revelation. You don't walk in bitterness, you walk in confirmation. You don't need to scream. Your presence is the sermon. Let them sit with what they did. Let the silence grow loud. Let the weight of your survival collapse the illusions they built to feel safe. You didn't break, you became the reminder. No. 6. Their masks are melting, and you're the heat they blamed. Chosen one, they're squirming now, not because you exposed them with words, but because you carried something into the room that didn't match their performance authenticity. You didn't point fingers, shout, or prove a thing. You showed up real. That alone unraveled the masks they'd spent years perfecting. Their reputations dripped like wax, personas collapsing under truth's weight. And guess who they're blaming? You. But let's set it straight. You weren't the fire, you were the light. You didn't come to destroy, you came to reveal. The truth they buried couldn't survive the brightness you brought. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1:5. You didn't walk in to cause a scene, you walked in aligned, grounded, discerning, clean, because your energy didn't bend to their power plays, false kindness, or staged loyalty. It made them sweat. You asked honest questions, moved with spiritual sensitivity, saw through the cracks in their performance. Instead of owning the act, they turned the lights on you. They called you too much, accused you of reading too deeply, said you were looking for drama. But they knew you were right. They just couldn't admit it. Admitting it meant confessing their character was a costume, their kindness camouflage. Now, life demands transparency. The wax is melting, and the masks are sliding. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open. Luke 8:17. Consider Ellen Powell, former Reddit CEO, who tried to bring truth to Silicon Valley's toxic culture. Instead of applause, she was vilified, blamed, painted as the problem. But time cracked the culture she exposed. Headlines changed, conversations shifted. The fire she was blamed for became the light revealing what couldn't stay hidden. That's your world. Chosen one. You're blamed for a fire you didn't start. All you did was enter with your soul intact, motives clean, integrity untouched. It rattled the atmosphere, because those with something to hide always accuse the truth of being too bright. Why were they so quick to label you the villain? Why did your peace bother them more than their deception? Because you couldn't be controlled. Your silence held more conviction than their words. You were never playing a role that scared them. You didn't speak to perform. You spoke to reveal. You weren't trying to impress. You were staying aligned. They needed someone to blame for the collapse. And who better than the one who never clapped for their act? You didn't join the gossip, pretend to be impressed by their influence, or play the part they assigned. When the lights flickered, they couldn't hold the scene. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. Proverbs 10:9. Look at Brandon Tina, whose story highlighted how truth and identity threaten communities in denial. Brandon wasn't causing chaos, just living in truth. The culture couldn't handle it, needed him gone to keep their illusion. Yet his name remains a symbol of courage, while those who erased him are buried in shame. His truth outlived their hate. That's your story. Chosen one. You didn't bring chaos, you brought clarity. You weren't fighting people, you stood in principle. When identities are built on illusion, principle feels like an earthquake. You weren't holding matches, you were holding a mirror. In a world of masks, a mirror is more threatening than fire. They're flinching now, scrambling, rewriting narratives, deleting posts, distancing themselves from lies they endorsed. The rooms are hotter, questions louder, inconsistencies obvious. People who nodded in agreement now whisper, "Didn't the chosen one say this already?" You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. Let's talk about Taylor Swift. Mocked for emotional honesty, called petty, dramatic, but her truth outlived ridicule. Her songs became anthems. Her vulnerability, a brand of bravery. She didn't fight louder, she aligned deeper. Even her critics sing her words. You weren't sent to be liked, you were sent to illuminate. Now, their constructed images melt like wax. What they rehearsed can't survive what you carry. It's driving them into silence, not peace, but shame. Have you been blamed for something just because you didn't join the lie? That's the cost of alignment. You'll always be too intense for those living in pretense. You'll always be the problem when the room depends on illusion. But don't doubt yourself. The discomfort you caused wasn't destruction, it was detox. The light you brought didn't burn them, the lie they lived did. The integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Proverbs 11:3. Consider Sharon Watkins, the Enron whistleblower. She didn't scream, she told the truth, exposing one of history's greatest corporate frauds, vilified, sidelined, targeted, but the system collapsed, and her truth lit the path to justice. Chosen one, you didn't demand destruction, you didn't agree to the lie. That was enough to set the unraveling in motion. Their roles slip, allies retreat, credibility dissolves. Your name isn't dragged anymore, it's remembered. Let this be your reminder. You don't need to raise your voice or fight fire with fire. Keep walking in clarity. Clarity can't be undone. It can be denied, but not erased. They tried to erase your influence, but not your impact. They tried to make you the problem, but now they stand in the mess they created. The mask won't stick. You were never the fire, you were the sunrise. They were trying to pretend it was still midnight. Let them melt. Let the wax drip. Let the truth scorch every illusion they wrapped around your name. You don't need revenge or retribution, you have alignment. Alignment always outlasts appearance. They wore wax faces in a world that always demanded fire. Now, the sun is up and the truth is blistering. No, 7. They gathered against you and still lost the battle they started. Chosen one, let's talk about what they thought would destroy you and what did them in. They gathered, whispered, plotted in circles behind your back, moved as if their unity would guarantee your defeat. They were loud, proud, thinking power was in their numbers. But they never calculated this. You weren't standing alone. You were standing aligned. No number of people can outvote divine alignment. Why do people feel safer coming against you in groups? Why do they rarely move in isolation? Because you intimidate them not with your voice, but with your vibration. You didn't match their chaos or compete. You stood in truth. That stillness unnerved them more than any attack could. Though they plot evil against you and devise wicked schemes, they cannot succeed. Psalm 21:11. Remember Rosa Parks, one woman on a bus, aligned with truth and courage, disrupted an entire system of inequality. The laws, structures, and people who gathered to maintain oppression thought she'd fold. But her stillness wasn't weakness, it was divine protest. Her quiet refusal sparked a nationwide shift. That's the force you carry. You weren't designed to follow the crowd, you were called to confront it, not with fists, but by standing firm in who you are. When people see someone who won't fold, who doesn't seek approval, who won't blend to belong, they panic. They mistook noise for strength, thought if they gathered enough people to repeat the same lie, it would become reality. But the universe doesn't respond to echo chambers, it responds to frequency. Your frequency isn't driven by popularity, it's driven by purpose. They clapped for each other, reinforced narratives in group chats, meetings, whispered conversations, hoping volume would drown you out. Now, the crowd that mocked you is in disarray. The alliance that stood against you is splintered. Why? The glue holding them together was fake. Their unity was built on ego, not integrity. And ego always eats itself. They will fight against you, but will not overcome you. For I am with you and will rescue you, declares the Lord. Jeremiah 1:19. Think of Edward Snowden, who stood alone against an international intelligence community, branded a traitor, erased by governments, media, and allies. But what remained truth over time? Those who condemned him saw cracks in their systems. One aligned man against a world of noise. and truth outlasted the shouting. Chosen one. Why question your strength just because they moved in a pack? Why think the crowd knows more than your creator? The size of the opposition never determines the outcome your foundation's substance does. Your foundation is not of this world. You didn't gather a group to fight back or assemble a counterattack. You let truth defend itself. You understood something they didn't. Destiny isn't a democracy. You don't need a majority when you have divine momentum. You don't need public support when you have prophetic alignment. If God is for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31. Look at Katherine Johnson, the NASA mathematician, denied a seat because of race and gender, underestimated, excluded, overlooked. But her silent calculations carried astronauts to space and back. Her math didn't need applause, it needed time. Now, those who shut her out acknowledge the foundation she laid. They gathered, thinking they could outvote your calling. But your anointing isn't up for public opinion. Your power doesn't come from consensus, it comes from conviction. You weren't designed to compete for attention. You were designed to disrupt patterns. Now, they're scattered, confused, quiet. When the noise dies down, what's left? The outcome. They lost the battle they started. They fired first, assembled early, moved with intention, and still lost. Why alignment always wins in the long run? They couldn't absorb you into their culture of compromise, bait you into a war of words, or dim you with distractions. Now, the battle they began has turned on them. You're walking through the fire untouched because you were never in it alone. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. Reflect on Malcolm X, who stood firm despite resistance, betrayal, and tragedy, outnumbered, criticized even by former allies. His alignment to truth, not popularity, made his voice echo for generations. They gathered to silence him, but amplified his message. The more they tried to discredit you, the more people noticed cracks in their story. The more they buried your name, the more your energy rose in rooms you never stepped into. You didn't need to retaliate, your resilience did the work. You didn't expect the crowd to turn, did you? You didn't expect trusted people to switch up under pressure. But their betrayal wasn't your downfall, it was your release. You were the mirror, and mirrors are dangerous in rooms full of illusions. So keep walking, keep rising. Let them count heads, check polls, manipulate narratives. The numbers never mattered. The spotlight they tried to keep you out of, you became the glow they couldn't contain. They lost, not because you fought harder, but because you refused to become what they were. That's the real victory. You stayed you. Now, the structure they built against you falls apart, one ego at a time. Truth doesn't need a crowd, just someone bold enough to carry it. That someone is you. No. 8. Let karma cook you don't have to watch. Chosen one. It's time to release what never belonged in your hands. You've done the work, held the line, stayed quiet when the crowd wanted you loud, stood still when noise told you to run, kept your integrity while they played games. Now, it's their turn to sit in the fire they built. You don't need a front row seat to watch it unfold. Let karma cook. You don't have to watch. You're not missing the show, because you were the reason it started. You were the trigger that exposed the truth, the presence that made masks itch, the clarity that disrupted their performance. Without you, their schemes wouldn't have been tested. Without your refusal to retaliate, the system wouldn't have recalibrated. Do not say, "I will repay evil." Wait for the Lord, and he will deliver you. Proverbs 20:22. Why waste your peace watching a fire you didn't start? Why spend energy checking outcomes when you've walked away with victory in your spirit? They betrayed you, lied, gossiped, smiled to your face, and stabbed your name in back rooms. But every ounce of what they did was seen. You don't need to explain. The universe took notes. Heaven handed over the blueprint. Think of Amanda Bynes, ridiculed, mocked, reduced to a punchline by an industry that used but never protected her. While the world laughed, she collapsed privately. Healing came slowly, quietly, and those who mocked her now sit silent. You don't need to witness every turnaround to know justice comes not always loudly, but always completely. Chosen one. You've seen enough. You felt every lie, fake handshake, moment someone pretended not to know what they did. You carried it with dignity. Now that karma's knocking, you no longer live near. Let it knock. Let it walk in. Let it rearrange everything. Don't waste your attention looking backward. The Lord is just. He is my rock, and there is no unrighteousness in him. Psalm 92:15. Look at Corey Feldman, who spoke out against Hollywood abuse. People rolled their eyes, dismissed him, but time validated his words. Those who stayed silent squirm. Headlines shift. Truth simmers, then rises undeniable. That's what's unfolding for you slowly, loudly, on divine time. They thought your silence was weakness. Your lack of retaliation meant you had nothing to say. But your silence was strategic. You didn't stay quiet because you were helpless. You knew heaven speaks louder when you step back. Now, the silence they laughed at is the sermon. The stillness they mocked is their storm. For it is written, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay," says the Lord. Romans 12:19. Have you felt tempted to check if karma's arrived? That itch to see justice served. That's not weakness, it's human. But chosen ones aren't just human. You're spiritual vessels carrying divine assignments. You weren't designed to sit in bitterness. You were designed to build through it. Every moment you look back steals energy from what you're constructing. Let them scramble. Post through pain. Pretend the fire isn't reaching their comfort zones. You don't need to be there to know it's real. You felt every slight in your spirit, now they feel every echo of consequence in theirs. You didn't wish this on them, didn't call for revenge. You wanted peace, understanding, clarity, not chaos. They chose the game, and karma's finishing the scoreboard. The righteous will be remembered forever. They will have no fear of bad news. Their hearts are steadfast. Trusting in the Lord, Psalm 112:6-7. Think of Shannon Doherty, painted as difficult, cast aside, ridiculed. She held her peace, walked through storms with grace. Now, the narrative changes. Her strength through cancer, betrayal, and media distortion redefines her legacy. They tried to define you by the fire, but you became the phoenix. Why check updates on people you've outgrown? Why wonder if they've gotten theirs? That's not your path or prize. Your growth is your justice, your evolution, your evidence. You didn't escape the fire. You outgrew the battlefield. You've graduated. Don't monitor the detention room. Let karma do the cleanup. Your time is too expensive. Your peace too valuable. Your purpose too massive. They wanted you bitter, but you're building. They wanted you distracted, but you're designing destiny. They wanted you obsessed with being proven right, but the universe ruled in your favor. Your absence is the consequence. Your silence the reminder. Your focus the fallout. The people who plotted your downfall dread your name, not because you're loud, but because your life confirms the truth they tried to erase. Every mention of your success makes them remember their betrayal. Every time your energy enters a room, they feel their consciences chill. You don't need to clap back or clear your name, just keep building, rising, becoming what they said you'd never be whole, healed, unbothered. You're not surviving, you're thriving without them. You were the one they underestimated, slandered, excluded, yet here you are, ascending. You're not waiting on karma. You were the catalyst. Let karma cook. Let it simmer in silence. Rise like steam over their false narratives. Unfold in rooms you'll never visit again. When you're truly aligned, you don't chase retribution, you become untouchable. No. 9. They should have left you alone. Now, the universe won't leave them alone. Chosen one. They had a choice, a moment, a divine warning that said, back off. But they didn't listen. They ignored the shift in your energy, the change in your tone, the silence in your spirit. They saw you moving differently and took it as an opportunity to provoke. Now, they've poked something they can't fight, touched something they can't explain. The force they toyed with is unraveling everything they built. They should have left you alone, not because you're dangerous or vengeful, but because you carried something greater than your self-alignment. When they targeted you, they weren't targeting a person, they were interfering with divine order, poking at a purpose not of this world. The universe doesn't forget that. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and he who rolls a stone, it will come back on him. Proverbs 26:27. Why couldn't they leave you alone? Why did your presence unsettle them so much they had to mock, challenge, twist it? Was it about you or what you carried? You were a signal, not just a soul, a disruption, not a distraction, a mirror, not a threat. When someone carries that clarity, it rattles what's false. Look at Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who came forward with truth and vulnerability. She didn't scream or attack, she revealed what was hidden. The backlash was immense, mocked, discredited, erased. But what she carried wasn't just words, it was conviction. Years later, her truth's echoes reverberate, while her mocker's credibility crumbles. You didn't start the storm, you stood in alignment, and the storm revealed itself. They thought they were challenging a person, but they were interfering with a divine equation. You weren't passing through their space, you were sent to correct it, touch not my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. 1 Chronicles 16:22. They threw stones at someone carrying fire, not to destroy, but to clarify, purify, reveal. The spiritual fire that doesn't need applause, defense, or vengeance. You showed up with truth their performance couldn't survive. They mocked the fire, laughed at the silence, called you dramatic, sensitive, too intense. They confused your boundaries for bitterness, your intuition for instability. But that fire they tried to smother burns through the systems they used against you, not because you asked for it, but because the universe answers energy, not intentions. Have you seen someone pretend they're fine while everything falls apart? That's them now, holding the mask with no glue. The truth is loud in their house. Relationships, peace. Every lie returns like a whisper in the dark. Every stone, a piece of rubble under their feet. The Lord is known by his acts of justice. The wicked are ensnared by the work of their hands. Psalm 9:16. Think of Janet Jackson, who bore an industry scandal not of her making, silenced, shamed, ostracized, while others walked free. Time revealed everything. Years later, the story flipped, and those who erased her explained themselves to a public that saw the truth. She didn't shout, her dignity did the work. You didn't retaliate, you moved on. That was enough to break their illusion. You let go of needing to be right, and truth rose in your absence. You outgrew the war they tried to pull you into. Now, they're haunted not by what you did, but by how little you had to do. The consequences are talking. Notice how quiet they've gone. The ones loud about you now. Avoid your name. That's not peace, that's pressure. Karma arrives like a wind they can't hold back. They thought it would come quickly, but universal justice waits. When it moves, it doesn't miss. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Galatians 6:7. Let's talk about Colin Kaepernick, vilified for kneeling in silent protest, labeled divisive, unpatriotic, dramatic. He stayed still, silent, while the world mocked. The truth simmered years later. His conversations are mainstream. The outrage faded, but his alignment remains. Those who came against him faced the scrutiny they threw on him. Your presence did what your words didn't have to. You didn't scream, curse, or post your pain for applause. You held the line. Divine timing did its perfect work. Now, the full circle has arrived. Everything they buried rises. Every seed planted in arrogance blooms into consequence. Every closed-door meeting, smear campaign, fake concern played back, not by you, but by life. Your absence is their alarm. Your elevation, the echo. Your peace, the prophecy fulfilled. They tried to fight a person, but they fought order. Tampered with protection, sabotaged a frequency not theirs. The universe doesn't take that lightly. Are you tempted to prove a point? Pause. The point's been made. Your life speaks volumes. Your peace shatters pretense. Those who swore you were the problem quietly recover from the exposure. You don't need to revisit the battlefield, the war is over, and you won. They should have left you alone. Now the universe won't leave them alone. You didn't just survive, you outlasted the storm they created. You didn't fight dirty or play their game, you stood in alignment while chaos tried to bend you. That endurance, that unshakable grace, shook the foundation built to break you. Let that be your closure, your confirmation. You were never outnumbered. You were covered. You were never silenced. You were refined. If this message hit your spirit, thank you for being here, walking this path with resilience and open eyes. Your presence is not taken lightly. If you feel led, consider supporting this message with Super. Thanks below. Every donation helps deliver truth to those who need it. But even if you don't give a penny, I'm beyond grateful for you listening, growing, and walking in divine alignment. Do one last thing. Share this with someone walking through fire, who thinks their silence is weakness, who doubts they'll make it out. Let them know they're not losing their mind, they're chosen. Their silence still echoes. May you be blessed with clarity, protected by divine timing, and surrounded by peace no storm can interrupt. Keep rising, keep shining. You are proof that truth never folds.